Welcome everyone to another episode of Women of Inspiration. I'm Tammy from Lines Arise, and my lovely guest today is Zoe Willems. Before I introduce Zoe, I just want to remind everybody that I've recently posted on Facebook a notification that I'll be starting a group for anybody who's interested in dealing with trauma. So this group is to create support for those of you that have been struggling with issues, and it's going to provide psychoeducation around the topic of trauma, as well as just looking at the origin of trauma, development of trauma, and looking at the impact on spirit, soul, and body. And it's also going to provide helpful tools and methods to help you deal with those things that you're struggling with. This is going to be a bi-weekly group. So depending on attendance, we're going to keep this group running and providing information. So at the end of this talk, there will be a slide that'll give you all the information you need. So you have to watch until the end if you haven't got that information already. So I'd like to introduce Zoe to you now. She is a child of God, and she's saved by grace. And she's a communication strategist, and I'm sure she'll tell us a little bit more about that. And she's also the co-founder of the iMeMovement, which we'll also hear a little bit more about. And she's a wife, and she's been married for 22 years. And she's a mom of a really beautiful girl who is now 16 years old. So Zoe, welcome to Women of Inspiration. And I'm going to give over to you now.
Yeah, I mean, maybe I can just give the listeners a little bit more information about myself. We're talking about women, and we're talking about the many roles of women, and testament to the fact that we as women have to wear many hats. Mm-hmm. And some of these hats are, I guess, self-inflicted. We want to wear those many hats, and others we just have to. It's our role within society. So the one hat that I wear is probably what I would call my day job, that is being a communication strategist. And I have the privilege of working on many big brands, and which also gives me access to a lot of research into consumers, but also into behaviors as human beings. And it gives me really a finger on the pulse in terms of what's going on in culture, in the world. So it's absolutely a role that I love, because it not only helps me in what I have to do to make money, but on the other hand, it also helps me with the iMeMovement, which is an organization that we found to really help, especially young people, but also adults, who are stuck in behavioral addiction. And that is really probably the one of the biggest problems in our time, because of the pressure that we live under, the mental health issues within the world, the things that we struggle with, and addictions become really the go-to place. And with behavioral addiction, it takes a very long time before it really catches up with us. We can, if you use hard substance, at some point your body will conk in. But in terms of behavioral addiction, we can carry on with our toxic and our addictive behaviors for a very long time. The problem is it remains an escape. And we've just seen specifically the big ones are pornography addiction, gaming addiction, and then you've got the others like eating disorders, cutting, that kind of thing. And that's definitely on the rise within society. We all run to our devices to get away from the things we can't cope with. And we've just seen a massive need. It came as a result of our own brokenness and us having to deal with the addictions in our lives. And that really gave rise to to us co-founding, my husband and myself, co-founding the iMeMovement, where we run recovery groups, we do talks, we really work with young people to rather deal with the issues than run to addiction and get stuck in a cycle of addiction. That's really not going to help you in the long run. And bring healing. So that's really the sort of, and then obviously, the other hats that I wear would be to be a wife and a mom. And you would think that those things come naturally. But, when we take on these roles, we're generally not prepared for them. So it's been a journey of also learning and developing in what it means to be a wife, what it means to be a mom. And I guess I'm going to learn until the day I put my head down.
Yeah, we don't get a manual for that.
No. I always joke and I say, it's funny when you give birth, there are generally a lot of books in terms of the developmental stages of a baby and how to change the baby's diaper. But when you get to teenage years, there's just no help. It's like you're a bit on your own. Everybody just throws their hands up and go, oh, it's so tough.
Yeah, and the thing is, they're all unique. And depending on how we're wired, depending on everyone's unique backgrounds, first of all, that's how we're going to parent. Because a lot of times we parent out of the knowledge we have to parent, and then we learn as we go along. We make the mistakes as we go along. And then it's to understand that our kids are all wired differently as well. What works for one doesn't always work for the other. And I feel also, just to come back to what you spoke about, the addictions, a lot of what our kids struggle with today, a lot of it is linked to social media addiction. And if we look at the prevalence, so just some stats on that is really rising, and especially for young girls. I mean, the boys are also struggling, but for the young girls, 75% of young girls by the age of 24 have already developed a common mental disorder or mental illness, should I say, like anxiety or depression. And the social media addiction and following all their favorite people and trying to keep up with all the trends doesn't help their situation either, because we're looking at that dopamine fix, right? The reward center of the brain that gets activated. So it's really difficult for our kids growing up in this age,
Yeah, there's just been I don't know if it's a leak or but there's now awareness of a recent Facebook study that was done specifically on Instagram, and they can make a direct link between the usage of Instagram for teenage girls and the suicide rates. So there are serious dangers around exposing a child that's still developing identity, still figuring out who they are, and putting them on a platform that is not authentic and real. And that becomes, their inner voice. It becomes what they believe about themselves, what they pitch themselves against. And it's generally so unhealthy that I would, if you see the research, you're like, well, I can't believe as parents we actually do that to our children.
Between the ages of 13 to 16, there's been a 68% rise in the last couple of years of self-harming, of, like you mentioned, the suicide rates. I mean, there's 1 in 3 girls are more likely to phone in to the child lines with suicide. I mean, and that's quite a high prevalence. And if you think between the ages of 13 and 16, our girls, but also our boys are finding identity. They're getting into that place where they need to make decisions. Adulthood's around the corner. And now they're already at this deficit because there's already the comparison, the measuring, and it's really sad, because how do we as parents sort of manage that and help our kids into their godly identity, as opposed to the world's identity and the world system of what something should look like?
Yeah, I mean, we got involved in a group of 13-year-olds at a school, simply because the teachers started to see major behavioral issues between the girls and the boys. So there's been really toxic behavior that's gone down, and they asked us to come in and do a 6-week program with the children. And it was just so the first thing we did was we wrote on we drew these circles on the board, and the middle circle is you as an individual. And then we started to plot around this little circle the different voices that this child, that they have in their lives. So, and we started with, what's the voice of your parents, the voice of your teachers, the voice of your grandparents. And then you start to look at the voices of social media, and what are the voices that these kids are exposed to. And it's 13-year-olds that we're talking about. So themes like men are trash, things like get me a sandwich, women should be in the kitchen. There were just so many voices that, you've got to look a certain way. The pornified, sexualized voices that are out there. And what was so telling is that when you had to draw a pie chart of what are those, how prevalent are the wrong voices, the lies, versus the truth, it's completely overwhelming. I mean, the social dilemma would say, I think it's if I remember correctly, for every one bit of truth, there will be, like four fake news articles read, so it's, or 6, it's like completely outnumbered. And I think when you then start to talk to parents and you realize that the parents don't know of all the voices that their children are exposed to. They don't know that their daughter is all the people she's only following fitness models, or they don't know. And then there's no counter voice. So the little voice that the parents have is not making a dent. It's not cutting through the volume of lies that these children are exposed to. And I think that is where us as parents have to work much harder, is to make our voices, the healthy voices in our children's lives, to make them heard. So make sure that we get the balance right, that we're starting to have a cut-through voice. And the only way we can do that is if we understand the culture that they operate within. We can no longer be those parents that go, it's just a phase, or you know what, these children, these stupid conversations, we brush these things off as if they not that important or that impactful. But they're very true to these children. They're very real. They're very prevalent. They're very important to them.
Yeah, it's 80%, isn't that? I mean, for me, it's 80% really of their life is social media. It's interacting with their peers. It's basing sometimes what they say, what they do, how they view themselves on what everybody else is saying, their peer group. Because especially at that age, from the age of 13 to 18, the peer group plays a much bigger role in their life than the parents. And why is that? Because their friends understand them. They're on the same level. They're up to date with the latest trends. And actually you said something, and I was going to ask you, is that, do you think as parents, we need to be up to date? We need to know what the trends are. We need to be actually part of this virtual world that they're part of, whether we like it or not, because this is the era we're living in. I mean, when we were 13 years old, when we were 12 years old, I mean, kids are starting from as young as 8 now with eating disorders, with suicide ideation, because they're on their devices, because they're comparing themselves. So when we were 8, we were still playing outside. We were still making little sand tracks and playing with our cars. And I remember doing that. I mean, I didn't know what it was to have a cell phone. We had to keep ourselves occupied. We did healthy things, actually. And now our kids are not exposed to that anymore,
No, absolutely. And I do think that back in the day, the portion of your day that had peer influence or even media influence was very small. And
if at all.
If at all. Yeah. I mean, we had to wait for Mnet open time to come, to come on. It's not that we had endless amount of content thrown at us. We had way more offline time than, media exposure. And the biggest lie that we tell ourselves is that our children have access to such vast amount of content. The thing is, and that it will open up the world for them. The thing is, there's an algorithm. Your child will only see more of the same. Their world is not getting bigger. They're not getting more exposure to different things. They just get exposed to more of the same. And when they're tired of, when they grow tired of the same, it will just give them the slightly bigger lie at the fringes of the sameness. And then they venture into a darker world. It never gives you the better side of the coin. It always gives you the worst side of the coin. So I think as parents, we started to believe a lot of lies, that if our children aren't connected all the time, they're going to be left behind. It's probably one of the biggest lies that we can tell ourselves. If we're so concerned with our child's social well-being, are they connected? Are we doing them a disfavor if we take them off social media? No, we will actually do them a favor. But it's going to take communities to rise up, because it's very hard if you a lone ranger in your school going, well, I'm not going to have spent that much time on social media. It's not good for me. But everybody else is there.
Yeah, it's a systemic problem, isn't it? It's
systemic problem.
So everybody has to be aware of the dangers and decide, okay, we're going to take a stand and we're going to do something about this.
Yeah. And even if you can raise up a small group, I mean, you don't need the masses. You just need pockets of people that you can surround your children with, that understand the dangers, that are up to date. And it's not about living under a rock. I don't think that's the answer. I just think that we need to be a lot wiser, and we need to understand the dangers and stop minimizing the dangers of it and thinking that it will be okay, because it's not okay. So.
Yeah, and also I think parents need to just be a little bit more active in their children's lives, because if you think God created us relationally, in the end of the day, what are they looking for? They're looking for a relationship. They're looking for someone to affirm them, someone to approve of them. we get that dopamine hit when we open our phone and we see, oh, there's been a like, or there's been a share, or somebody said something positive about our post, and everything goes off in the brain. But what will happen if we start receiving that in the home? What will happen if our homes become more relational rather than work orientated, or there's got to be a structure and there's got to be an organization, and there is time for that in the home? But what about making more time in the home just to say, I appreciate you? What are some of the things we're thankful for today? Like these little dinner table rituals where we can say, this is what I appreciate. This is what I'm thankful for. How many parents are encouraging that? And there probably are parents out there that do that. But I mean, not only parents, but couples that'll take that time in a day to sit down and be relational and have connection, not connection with a device, social connection, virtually, but actually with the people in their lives, because that's what we actually need.
Yeah, the answer, I think, is so simple. We think it's like, we have to do big things. But it's a bit like getting in shape, You don't you don't have to go overboard. If you can consistently exercise for 20 minutes a day, you'll be in good health. That's so it's not the big things, it's the simple things. But we as a society neglected really simple things. It's biting us now, and our children are really suffering.
Because I also think, with the demands, so we come back to the roles again, the demands placed on us by society, and I think even especially for women that have all these roles, we sometimes don't always have the time to parent like we want to be. So that's the other side of the coin. Our lives are busy. We've got schedules, we've got to get to work, we've got to cook dinner, whatever it is that we need to do. And we don't always have the time to be an attentive parent, to be that parent that's there all the time. So for me, what I would say is to just intentionally make time to check in with your kids, to check in with your spouse, whether it be once a week, every second day, or try and do it every day. Try and get those rituals going. I don't know from your side what you would give as advice.
In my experience, because I've made that typical, and you just, the words you use now were the words that I used. Is I have to do this, I have to do that, and I have to, and we. One of the biggest lies that we as women started to believe, and we also passed that lie on to our children. And I think someone actually wrote it or said it so beautiful, is that the biggest lie that we started to believe is that serving an employer is freedom, and serving a family is slavery.
Wow.
And what changed for me, because I've been this for many years, is that I kept on telling myself that I have to, and it's just a priority thing. It's a perception, perspective, and priority thing. And when that changed in my life, when I went like, but what if I apply that same language to, I have to invest in my child, I have to build relationship first, that is my first priority. Then you start to put different boundaries in place. You start to say no to things that previously you thought, if I say no to that, I'm going to lose my job, or I'm not going to get that promotion, or whatever. But you know what? If you start to set the right boundaries in place and say yes to the right things and no to the wrong things, it really changes things for the better. And I can honestly say it didn't impact my work to the same effect that it impacted my child's life when I wasn't around. But you can't actually compare the two. That corporation will always be there. Or it will be there for as long as, it's got an economic viability. That job will be around. There will be other jobs. That is how economies work. But your child is only going to be a teenager once.
It's true.
Your marriage is what's going to matter in the end. When you're old, when you need people around you the most, when you need companionship, when the chips are down, that's when all the relationships you invested in will really matter. It's not going to be a job. So I think I've certainly believed a lie for a very long time, and it was so liberating for me to let go of that lie and to just go, well, it isn't freedom to serve an employer at the expense of my family. No salary check, no economic sort of stability can replace the joys that come from a good relationship in the home, from a stable home, from that safety that you find within family. Yeah. And I guess that's what we all as women have to make out for ourselves is, what do we value? Because what we value is where we will spend our time and our efforts. And the things that aren't going to serve us well in the long run are the things that we need to let go. And it's not going to be easy because, and I think when I was in counseling and I was completely overwhelmed and completely I had too many balls I was trying to keep in the air, and I was anxious and freaked out. The therapist said to me, what's going to happen if you drop some of the balls? What's going to happen? Just drop it. You're tired. You can't hold up all those balls. Just drop them. Just make sure you don't drop the glass ones. Make sure you don't drop the ones that you cannot repair when they dropped. And that's generally your marriage, your child. It is the most vulnerable in your life. Those balls you can't drop, but the rest, a washing basket can be dropped, a dinner can be dropped, your house being tip top, that can be dropped. There's what society thinks of us, that can be dropped.
What scripture is ringing in my head is seek first the kingdom of God, and all these things will be added to you. And I was having a conversation with somebody the other day, and I was saying, we're so busy trying to provide. We're so busy thinking about what's the future going to look like. Are we going to have enough money? Is there going to be enough of this? And in the end of the day, it comes down to it's not about how much money you've made. It's not about how much material things you have. It's really about the relationships in your life and why God has put you here. And he's put you here for others. It's to be in relationship with him because we are his glory, and we should carry his glory, go from glory to glory. But the people's lives that we impact, and this was actually the conversation, is if we go one day and we're not here, what are people going to say? What have you left behind? They're not going to worry about all the money that you have. Okay, maybe somebody will benefit from your money, that's fine. But in the end of the day, people remember who you were. They remember the type of person you were. Yeah. They remember the interactions that they had with you. Did you impart something to their lives? Did you make an impact? And there's more value in that. And most of all, the people in your life that really matter are those, like you were saying, that are closest to you, your husband, your children, even your grandchildren. When they come along, they're important. That is what matters. And to touch on what you said about the should, the woulds, and the musts, I was having this conversation as well the other day around cognitive distortions. These are really cognitive distortions. It's those things that we've come to believe are true based on the way we've been raised, based on influences in our life, that I must do this and I should do that. And it's like we need to also have a look at those. It's actually a self-imposed law that we're putting on ourselves. And when we do that, we also move out of the will of God, because you were talking about those principles, and really we must always look at it. What are God's principles for marriage? What are God's principles for relationship? What are God's principles for money and finances? What is important? What is the most important thing? And weigh it up, in light of that. And the fast-paced, instant society that we live in now gives us the message that if something looks too hard to do, we just don't do it. Yeah. We go, no, that's too hard. I can't do it. Like you're saying about the social media, what is it that we need to do to bring a change? How do we? And we know that it's hard to change a neural pathway, but the thing is, it can be changed within 21 days. And within 40 to 60 days, it can be established. So you can change your whole life in 60 days if you want to intentionally put something else in place.
It's crazy if you think about it.
Yeah.
When we plotted those voices with the 13-year-olds, we asked them, so how do you judge which one of these voices are true and which ones are lies? How would you know? I mean, you've got all these voices coming at you. You need to determine what are you going to take for yourself and what are you going to say is not for me. And we, they couldn't really answer it. And eventually we got to the place, but it is, the only way to make sense of it is to pitch it against the original objective moral truth that's given to us by the creator of heaven and earth. We have to take every single voice that's thrown at us and go, let me measure it against God's truth. And you will very quickly see the counterfeit. You will very quickly see. The thing is that sometimes the truth is not what we want to hear. It doesn't sit well with our sinful nature, with our fallen nature. Everything in us go, well, I don't like it. And
it's pride also, hey?
Pride. And we say to them, guys, God's got an original blueprint. He's not asking you whether you like it or not. He's just saying, here's the original blueprint for life, for a successful, sustainable, viable life. Here's the role of the man. Here's the role of the woman. This is how I designed it to work. And it's a bit like when you go and get an iPhone and they say to you, use it in this particular way. And if you look after it this way and you use it for phone calls and for messaging and for photography and what have you, it's going to be amazing. But if you use it as an oar, it's going to break. And then you can't bring it back and say, well, you know what, I immerse it in water and I try to actually paddle with it. It's they're just going to say, well, let's refer to the original design of this.
What's the function?
The function. It was designed for X, Y, and Z. You didn't use it for that. So your guarantee is no longer in place. We can't replace that for you. And I think that's the thing about life, is that God said, I'm going to give you free will, but I give you a manual. I give you an original design. Women, you were designed as such. If you operate outside of the original design, you're probably going to be anxious. You're probably going to be suicidal. You're probably going to be depressed. You're probably going to feel overwhelmed most days. But there's an answer. Just come back to the original design, and you'll have peace. You'll function the way you're supposed to function.
Yeah, and I guess that counts as well for the men, right? Because if each of us fulfill our role equally, like we're supposed to, then it's like the Bible says, that men must love their wives as they love themselves. The woman is the weaker sex. So it's not that we're weak, but we weren't designed to carry what the men were designed to carry. And it comes back to what we were talking about a bit earlier, before the session, about the feminist movement. Women are rising up now, and they're sort of kicking against the grain, but God didn't create us. And maybe it's also become out of necessity, because stuff has happened in society where men are maybe not fulfilling their roles, where maybe there's been an emasculation due to various reasons. And women feel now they need to rise up. But at the same time, now they're carrying burdens, they're carrying stresses that wasn't theirs to carry.
Absolutely. Yeah, and I think that is, if we see modern culture for what it is that it is, in my view, an absolute attack on the original design of God. And it's just got one agenda, and that is to kill, destroy, and to bring destruction. And it is happening. It's happening. If the male is not fulfilling his role, and the woman's not fulfilling her role, the sexes are being pitted against each other. What's going to become of the family? What's going to become of multiply and fill the earth, be fruitful, cultivate? None of that's going to happen, because we are so in opposition to one another, that the beauty of what God intended is not going to be there. If we go back to the original design and we say, look, it's not about the feminist movement, it's not about toxic masculinity, it's not about all of that. Let me go ask God, what is your original plan? And let me be obedient to that. Let me step into the role. I'm going to silence those voices, and I'm going to say, God, what do you want me to be as a man? And it's interesting, if you look at the original, plan, how God designed the man to be. He said, I want you to be to guard, to protect, to cultivate, to watch, to keep safe, to defend. And all that speaks of taking responsibility. It speaks of laying down your life. It's if you think in the olden days, the man in the olden days, they had to lay down their lives for their country. There was it wasn't about my comforts. It wasn't about it. It was about a bigger cause, a bigger purpose. There was this heroic thing that was embedded in being a man. And nowadays you have males that don't even want to give up their next game, to serve a family. So there's a massive attack on that, what God intended the man to be. And I mean, it's a big responsibility. It's the defender and the God of society. It's a massive role. The men has to step up. And then the women are designed to be the helper. And if you ask women, the first thing they would say is, how can I help? What can I do? What can I do to make things better? Because that is in us. It's in our DNA to want to help and to
we're carers. Yeah, carers, nurturers.
We want to make things better. And when the male fails, then the woman, in her attempt to help, she then steps into a role that is often shoes that's too big for her to fill, because it was meant to be filled by her counterpart. And when she does her bit, he does his bit, he lays down his life, she submits, you literally build each other up like this, but now we in the business of pushing each other down. And now you're sitting with single mothers, you're sitting with absent fathers, really bad role models for our teenagers. And I think it's time now for us to say, well, it's not working. So maybe we should return to the original design of God and say, God, how did you intended this to be?
And social media has played a huge role in all of that, in promoting these opposite agendas. Because if we look all over social media, there's always something being promoted. And very, very, very little of what is being promoted is bringing stuff back into divine order.
Yeah.
And it's like we want to latch onto that, because I also think it's linked to wounding. So for men and women, it's linked to the wounding. If something appeals to your wounding and almost justifies it or makes it feel better, you want to grab onto it. And you're going to go, yes, I'm going to take a stand for that, because this is the way I've been treated. It's unfairness, it's injustice. And that might be true, but we need to weigh up, you mentioned that earlier, the counterfeit. And if we look at trust, so for example, if as children, men and women, our trust has been violated, if we don't have people that come into our life to rebuild trust and to build up that picture again, we are going to enter relationships with a mistrust in our husband, a mistrust in our wife, mistrust with our kids. There might be disrespect. And so it's the cycle, and it plays into the wounding. And so we just keep that cycle going instead of going, wait a minute, how do I heal this? What is out of whack here that needs to come back into alignment? Because it comes back again to the cognitive distortions, what we've grown to believe is true based on our experiences.
Yeah.
So I think if we can just have a look at the root of where some of this comes from, and we can be honest with ourselves, I think that's also a really good place to start. That we don't need to feed into, like you said, all those voices around us that we don't realize, or a lot of people maybe do realize, but don't pay attention of, are actually designed, fabricated to get you to believe what they are saying and to follow a certain stance or a certain viewpoint or belief system. I mean, if I think of what you do, a communication strategist, I mean, how does that tie into targeting messages? And we don't want to give your work a bad rap, but yes.
But I mean, it's exactly that. Communication and advertising and marketing is all about behavior change. At the core of it is, you currently buying X, I need you to buy Y, which means that I need to swap your choice from one to the other. Now, I need to give you messaging. I need to give you a reason to want to say no to this and yes to that. Now, what's happened in the world of marketing and advertising and communication is that they now have access to a lot of information, a lot of data that really show them what the current human behavior is. You can read a lot of it, into the psychology of what sits behind behavior. And then they run, tests to go, well, if I prompt you like this, if I make this emotive, and a lot of it, it's not functional messaging, it's emotive messaging. If I tap into that kind of emotion, I can shift your behavior. I can change your choice making, your decision making. I can influence it.
Mm.
And added to that, now there's brain studies, there's behavioral economics,
Yeah, it's scary.
neuroscience, and you can just go and have a look at your big platform brands, your social media brands, your big tech brands. On their staff contingent will be neuroscientists, behavioral economic, people with an understanding, psychologists, psychiatrists, because they make money by influencing people's behavior. The issue is that they're trying to influence it at mass. So if they can get you to add your lone voice to their cause, they've recruited you. You become an ambassador. You become a influencer yourself, because you're adding every like that you make on social media, every comment that you make, where you spend your money. Those are all indications of the kind of world that you buy into. At the end of the day, we tell ourselves that we are individuals and, self-expression, but you're basically expressing what they've told you to express. You're expressing someone else's agenda. You haven't made that up for yourself.
It's mass conditioning.
It's mass conditioning. And I think when we wake up from that and we say, and you know what really gets us out of that is the word of God, because it brings truth, and truth is painful, but it's also liberating. It makes us look at the world through a different lens. And the thing is, they've sold us a lens and a conditioning and a world that is very comfortable, that says it gives us popularity, it gives us social currency, it promises a lot of things that look and feel good, but it isn't what it's seen. The net result of it is empty, and it's not satisfying, and it's not fulfilling. And until we get to the point where we completely dissatisfied with that net result anymore, we're not going to turn to the truth.
Yeah, and it's also a lot of it is very self-focused.
Yeah.
Because if you think, our reward center in our brain is triggered when we talk about ourselves. There's something that happens within us. And so 30 to 40% of our natural engagements with people, we're often talking about ourselves, whether we're sharing something or we're telling somebody something. But 80% of what people do online is all about themselves. A lot of it is about their life, where they went, what they did, what they bought, or they want somebody to hear something, that they have to say. And 80% of this. So if you think that is a lot of it self-absorption, self-focus. So when you brought up the word of God, that's what triggered that for me, is because if we get into the word of God, it's the opposite.
Absolutely.
And it's not that we debase ourselves and that we don't mean anything and that we're not important, but we have to be important in the right design of things, because it comes back to what we spoke about earlier. It's not all about us.
No.
And so that's the positive side of media, is that we can use it like a talk like this, putting it out to bring information. We can use it to spread the word. We can use it to bring enlightenment around topics. So we know that God can use it for his agenda as well. So I think it's up to us as a society. So what are we going to do with media? How are we going to utilize it?
And it's to change the narrative, is to be a counter voice. I think if that's one thing we can be, is if there are more and more people that bring the truth it becomes together, it becomes a counter voice that starts to balance out fake news and the lies, the toxic things that are being spewed. It can bring a counterbalance, and I think that is ultimately what they wouldn't want is for that voice to rise up, and the truth is not welcomed. We want to make our own truth, but it's not serving us well at the moment. Our children are completely lost. They feel displaced. They don't feel like they're safe, that they have boundaries, because the minute you take the absolute truth away, what is true now? Where do I pitch my bets? What are the rules? You've taken the rules away. So it's not nice to play a game without rules. It's chaos. It's why do we have rules in a board game? So that we can all have fun together. We know
the parameters.
Parameters, and now we've taken it away. There are no male, there are no female. You can decide what you're going to be. We just throw all the rules out of the game of life. And then we feel lost and we feel anxious because we I don't know if I make this move, if it's going to get me any further. And, I don't know if marriage is going to last. I don't even know if marriage is a thing. Before, sex was sacred. Now sex it doesn't matter. So nothing that we knew before is now a thing anymore.
It's like, let's make our laws so that we can feel comfortable within those laws, because that actually suits our lifestyle. It suits it's when you spoke about the truth, it's also just like we said earlier about the comfort of staying in that place, because it's easier to stay in that place. To become committed and intentional about something isn't an easy thing to do. If we seek first the kingdom of God, all these things will be added. Like you said, when you made that choice to put what should be first,
and I think it was hard for a little while, and it was really hard. I'm not going to say it was a walk in the park. So I think there's something I want to share today, that was probably one of the most profound things. But in order to share that, I probably have to give a little bit of a backstory. So I was working extremely hard, and there was massive imbalance in our house. So my husband at the time was really struggling with job opportunities, and his income was very on and off. And I was the main breadwinner. So I was literally working at times 13 hours a day, trying to build, to pay the bills, what have you. And it was as a result of many small mistakes that we've made along the way. As a result of many, when we started to unpack it and you start to take responsibility for where it started to go wrong, it's so easy to try and pinpoint it on if my husband only did X, Y, and Z. But then when you're really honest with yourself, it was a multitude of wrong mistakes, wrong choices along the way that got us into this situation. And because the world looked like that around me, women worked, career women are celebrated, sitting in the C-suite, having a corner office. All those things were like the epitome of a successful woman. Being a soccer mom, a stay-at-home mom, homeschooling was just not cool, And at the same time, my husband fell into pornography addiction. Well, it came a long time, and we were in this place where it was literally it had to change or it was just going to fall apart. It was, it was just that crisis moment that I thank God for, I really thank him for that moment of crisis in our lives, and where we've come to the end of ourselves, where you literally put your present on the table. You look at this disastrous present and you go, this is not working, and we're going to have to change it. We don't know how, we don't know where to start, but we know we have to start. And we started to make big changes in our lives. So the first thing is we started the recovery process for Coral. Then I gave up my job we started the iMeMovement. We started to spend a lot more time with Lisa, invested in Lisa. We moved to a different province. I needed to break that toxic cycle of being a workaholic. All those things, break with my network. It was big changes. We made big life changes. And it was at times I felt like we're not going to make it, because we also financially it was a massive impact on our finances. It was tough. But through it all, because we made that big step change, it changed. It was slow, but we healed, we learned, we took responsibility and all of that. Now, this is where the nugget comes in. So that's just the backdrop. When my husband came through his recovery and we started to rebuild our marriage and we started to rebuild our relationship with Lisa, one of the things that I struggled with is that for so long I had to take responsibility for the income, for and together with that, the pornography addiction and all of that. I had massive issues around trust, to actually let any ball fall. I always felt like I needed to check in. I needed to make sure that Coral is still on track. I just had to be on high alert all the time. Because
so it was almost like you had to control your environment to keep the anxiety down.
Yes. And you it's high functioning anxiety, but you just realize that the minute there's a misstep or the minute anything crumbles, my entire world, because I had to give up so much to start this journey, to start this journey of healing. I needed to leave a job. I needed to leave security. I needed that. I couldn't afford for this thing to fail. Failure wasn't an option. But you also realize it's so out of my control. What my daughter does, what my husband chooses, none of that is in my control. I can white knuckle, I can control, I can check in, I can put all these guardrails in place, but I still can't control it. And I couldn't come to terms with it. So it was like, I would be in counseling and, I could hear the truth, but it doesn't register. I walk out there still controlling, still white knuckling, still, and I realized that I couldn't carry on like that for the rest of my life. There was just this realization that I'm going to run out of steam. At some point, I'm going to be so tired that there's going to be nothing left of me. And I was crying out to God to help me. Like, how do I let go? How do I come to a place of complete peace and surrender, trusting that it will all be okay? How do you get to a place where you trust that you are okay? You're in good hands. You're safe. You can just breathe. That's all I wanted, was to just breathe, and I couldn't. I felt like I was holding up my breath all the time. And I was, one night, it was probably one of the most profound moments in my life, is God asked me, and I mean, I'm not one of those people that have these audible, like, God experiences, or, but it was like this very clear question that I was in prayer, and God said to me, do you believe that you are worthy of love and belonging? And I was like, it was like, sure, do I really believe that? Because Carl didn't choose me always. Sometimes he chooses me. He says, I want to be your husband. But sometimes he watched porn. Then he was like, he didn't want to be my husband. He wanted to be with someone else, So the evidence that I'm worthy of love and belonging from a human perspective was not there always, So you sort of go, okay, well, I'm not always chosen. People don't always choose me, Sometimes people choose themselves, or they choose another person over me.
Or behavior.
Yeah. So I sat there and I was like, I'm not sure if I'm worthy of, I don't know if I truly believe it. So I did the whole analysis thing. And then God said to me, okay, Zoe, I want to ask you something. As God, am I worthy of all the love, the praise, the honor that's, from my people? And I go, yeah, God, you are worthy. We all know you're worthy. I mean, you are the most worthy being, that's out there. And he said, so when they don't choose me, does it make me less worthy? And I was like, wow. Okay. So he said, okay, so when someone doesn't choose you, it doesn't make you less worthy. And I was like, okay. And he said, okay, well, but let's prove why you're worthy. And he said to me, in whose image are you made? I said, I'm made in your image. Sorry. And he said, that's why you're worthy. And it changed my life.
That's beautiful.
Yeah. And then what I did is it became my mantra. Whether my husband chooses me or not, I'm worthy. Whether my child disappoints me or not, I'm worthy. Not because I'm good, but because I'm made in his image and he's worthy. And it was just like such a simple, profound moment.
It's really
so I want to say to the women out there, make that out for yourself. Because a lot of the things that we do comes out of a feeling of we're not worthy. So we control, we manipulate, we sometimes shout and scream and kick and serve and become doormats, and we do all sorts of things. And a lot of that comes out of a general feeling of unworthiness, because people around us have given us the message of unworthiness, but it's a lie. If your father abandoned you or you were sexually abused, that's all messages that says you weren't worthy of love and belonging. You weren't worthy of being cared for. You weren't worthy of protection. And it becomes our big voice in our head that we're not worthy. And then we try and fight for it we try and I don't know, somehow get a sense of we're good enough back into our lives. And And yeah, I just think that if we can land, when that landed for me, it was almost like day and night. Whether you're chosen or not, you're still worthy of love and belonging. I think what was so profound about that for me was that it didn't only impact me, it also impacted my relationship with Carl, because when you operate out of a place of worthiness and there is absolute freedom in it, there is a sense of peace. And what was so beautiful is that he realized that he is married to someone who is worthy of love and belonging, not because she's perfect, but because she is made in the image of God. So when I shared my moment with him,
wow.
It changed, to the point where we renewed our vows, and we realized that there is worthiness within, there's a lot of worth within our covenant. There is, and when you start to realize the treasure that's within us as human beings, because we made in his image, and you start to treasure that worth within each other, it takes the relationship to a very, very, very special place. So I would like to just encourage women to really make work of it, to find that truth, that they are worthy. And it's not something that you can just say to yourself. It's something that needs to resonate within you. It's almost like a penny that drops, and then once that's there, it really changes your life.
Yeah, and I think for everyone out there, it's just to remember that the enemy's agenda against us is to take us away from the Father heart of God. It's to take us away from that design, from our identity in Christ that we have. And you know what the word says, that we have authority. We have the authority to trample on scorpions and serpents, and we know who that is. So we need to really rise up in that identity and come against the enemy, what he's doing in our families, what he's doing in our marriages, what he's doing in the lives of our children. Yeah. And to just rise up into that place. And Zoe, I just want to say thank you for sharing your story and being vulnerable, because I know how many women out there will be able to identify with that. And I know it's going to touch people, and I know it's going to inspire other women as well in their circumstances.